Welcome to today's explainer. Look, if you've ever found yourself completely tangled up in the massive web of SAP's automatic payment process, just staring at your screen, wondering how on earth to elegantly extract and format payment data for a bank, well, you're in exactly the right place. Today, we're diving into one of the most powerful, yet honestly frequently misunderstood tools in the entire SAP FICO arsenal, the Data Medium Exchange Engine, or DME, and its supercharged S/4HANA Evolution, DME-EX.
We're grounding everything today in this really incredible piece of source material, an integrated guide on the SAP automatic payment process by FICO consultant Sharad Mishra. What's so fantastic about this guide is that it isn't just theory. It's meticulously designed for consultants navigating real-world, highly technical configurations. We're going to distill the absolute best, field-tested insights from it right now.
All right, here's our roadmap for this explainer. 1. The end of complex ABAP. 2. The integration architecture. 3. The execution logic. 4. Mapping source data nodes. And 5. The S/4HANA DME-EX upgrade. Let's get right into it.
Section 1. The end of complex ABAP.
So think about how things used to be done. Historically, the old way meant that every single time a company needed to send a specific file format to a commercial bank, it required a developer to sit down and write these incredibly complex, custom ABAP programs from scratch. It was tedious, it was rigid, and honestly a massive headache. Enter the new way. The DME engine literally changes the game by allowing a functional consultant, you, to configure that entire file layout graphically. You're no longer writing endless lines of code, you're literally just building a visual tree structure. It's brilliant.
Moving on to Section 2, the integration architecture.
Okay, so before the file is even generated, we have to understand how the backend flows. The linkage here follows a really strict 4-step configuration hierarchy. It all kicks off at Step 1, the F110 payment run. From there, that payment data trickles down to Step 2, the FBZP configuration for the payment method per country. Then it flows right into Step 3, OBPM1, where the format is officially assigned, and finally it lands at Step 4, which is the actual DME or DME-EX graphical format tree structure. It's a chain. Break even one link in this flow and the whole file fails.
Let's zoom in on Step 1 for a second, that FBZ setup. When you're in there configuring your payment method per country, there's a totally critical toggle you need to hit. Instead of using the classic payment programs, you absolutely must select Use Payment Medium Workbench, or PMW. It's crazy how this one little radio button acts as the essential bridge to modern formatting. Once you check that, you just go to the Format field and plug in the name of your specific payment medium format, something like SEPA_CT, for example.
Now for Steps 2 and 3. This is where we actually link that PMW to our graphical tree. Inside T-code OBPM1, the absolute make-or-break moment is the type dropdown. You have got to select Electronic Data Medium and then choose DME Engine. Why? Because this explicit setting forces SAP to totally abandon those hard-coded ABAP programs and actually look for your custom graphical layout instead. Plus, you'll use T-code OBPM5 to map that format to a selection variant, which gets everything ready for automated file creation through F11.0.
All right, Section 3, the execution logic.
So let's step into the engine room. Before any data ever reaches the DME engine, it needs a staging area. Think of it kind of like a train station waiting room. In SAP, this is called the PMW repository. When you fire off that F1010 payment run, SAP runs in, grabs the raw payment header data from the REGH table, pulls the line item data from the REGUP table, and temporarily parks all of it right here in the repository before the real magic happens.
Once the DME engine is finally called up, it looks directly at that tree structure you built, and I really want you to visualize a literal tree branching out here. The trunk of the tree is your root node. This defines all the high-level administrative data, like whether we're ultimately outputting an XML or just a flat file. The next branch down, those are your header nodes. This is your global file info that only appears once per file, like the creation date or your company's bank identifier. Then things get really interesting with the record or transaction nodes. These actually loop dynamically. For every single row of payment data parked in that REGUH table we just mentioned, a brand new transaction node block is written into the file. And finally, you cap it off with the footer nodes. These contain your total control checks, like the total combined dollar value of all the payments in the file. And let me tell you, banks rely heavily on these footer totals to verify that absolutely nothing was tampered with during transmission.
Section 4, Mapping Source Data Nodes. Okay, so how do we actually populate those tree branches with data?
The source guide breaks down 5 main ways to map this out, and it's honestly a brilliant framework. First, you have structure fields. These just directly copy a value from an SAP database straight into your file. Second, a constant. This simply hard codes a fixed value that never changes, like always outputting the currency as USD. Third is a system field, which pulls dynamic application variables from the OS, like today's date. Fourth is aggregation, which tracks cumulative mathematical totals, perfect for those footer tags we just talked about. And lastly, the exit module. This one is huge because it allows you to call custom ABAP for any really complex logic.
Let's ground all this technical theory in some reality. Say you're configuring a file, and the bank suddenly says they require the vendor's SWIFT code on every single payment line. In the old days, code. Today, you simply create a node, set the mapping type to structure field, and point it directly to FPAH-ZBNKS. Boom. Done. SAP will now automatically extract that SWIFT code for every single payment in the run. Literally a few clicks. The time this saves compared to the old way is just incredible.
But what happens when a bank comes at you with a completely bizarre requirement? Let's say their ancient legacy mainframe completely crashes if a vendor's name happens to contain an ampersand or a hyphen. They need a highly specific string truncation that basic, standard SAP mapping just can't handle out of the box. Well, that's exactly when you deploy the exit module. It is your ultimate safety net. You just map the node to an exit module, which then calls a tiny, hyper-targeted piece of ABAP code to convert that string into regex-safe characters exclusively for that specific bank. You get all the power and flexibility of custom code, but you aren't forced to hardcode the entire file structure. Best of both worlds.
Section 5. The S/4HANA DMEX Upgrade.
Now let's zoom back out and look at the modern landscape. The delta between the legacy DME system and the modern DMEX upgrade essentially boils down to a few massive advantages. First up, you get an enhanced graphical UI. It's a way cleaner interface, and it actually allows for easy version comparison, so you can track format changes over time. But the real game changer here is extended dynamic formatting. DMEX natively handles complex XML schemas, those XSD files, making the massive global shift toward ISO 2022 XML formats incredibly seamless. It does all of this heavy lifting natively, which just further wipes out those old, heavy ABAP code dependencies.
Which brings us to our final takeaway for this explainer. You've seen the architecture, you've seen just how intuitive visual node mapping can actually be. So as you look at your own SAP FICO environments, the question you have to ask yourself is pretty clear. Are you going to continue relying on rigid, legacy ABAP coding, or will you empower yourself to truly master the DMEX tree? The tools to create elegant, code-free configurations are quite literally right there waiting for you. Thanks for exploring this with us today.